I want you to think of a political debate. Any major political debate will do. Someone says social politics. What is the first thing that comes to your mind? Now, if you're waiting for a magic trick, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you. But I bet good money that the issue has two sides, and about 50% of the population seems to agree with you. How do I know this? Well, pretty much every American political debate has two sides, with about 50% of the population on either side. Think about it. Gun legislation, for example. You're either pro-Second Amendment or pro-gun legislation. Almost every debate is presented with either or terms. You have option red and option blue. What this does is it creates something called a false dichotomy. A false dichotomy is the illusion that you're being given only two choices, while in actuality, you're only actually getting one. So this completely cuts out any third-party options. You are given A or B, and B is always wrong. Think about marriage equality, for example. There's never a discussion on any kind of middle ground. There's not really any options to discuss anything that's between these two extreme viewpoints. Either you're for a biblical view of marriage, and the other side is going to cast a nation into hell, or you're for a good, tolerant viewpoint that believes all American citizens being made equal, and the other people are a bunch of angry hicks that can't possibly think logically or have two brain cells put together. This is how every major American political debate works. So, why perpetuate this system? Why perpetuate a system that ignores most of the options in favor of two extreme ends, and then pits them against each other in such a way that you're either with us or against us? Because if you silence the third option, if you make everything with us or against us, then the middle ground becomes a no man's land instead of a bridge. So instead of being able to reach out across the divide and say, we have these things in common, let's work on them, let's try to build something off of that. What you have is, by the time someone gets to the middle ground, both parties wash their hands. Both parties will look at them and say, you're too liberal to be one of us, or you're too conservative to be one of us. And the person ends up adrift. So politically, it pays to be on spectrum A or spectrum B. So this system, obviously, wouldn't accomplish much. You don't have a lot of discourse because you can't hit a middle ground. Middle ground is disadvantageous in this system. So why promote it? Why keep it going? If you just look at the most recent Congress and the amount of legislation we've punched out in the United States, obviously it's not terribly effective. It doesn't get things done. So why do we maintain it? Well, when an argument gets long enough, when it reaches ecological stability, so you've got about 50% of the party, 50% of the nation on either side, what you'll end up seeing is that they don't really fight with each other anymore. Now, it sounds ridiculous. You think of gun control advocates versus pro-Second Amendment people, and I'm not considering they're going to be butting heads. And on an individual basis, you might be right. But for the most part, we don't really engage with the opposition very much. Take Facebook, for example. Go through your major social media platform. Look at all of your friends. I'm willing to bet good money yet again that about 90% of them are within a couple of degrees of you, politically speaking. If you post something that is politically poignant, the vast majority of your friends who are at all politically inclined are probably going to agree with you. It forms an echo chamber where we don't ever really have to talk to the opposition for the most part. Now, of course, there could be individual exclusions to this, people who specifically seek out this kind of dialogue, but for the most part, your average person surrounds themselves with people who think similarly to themselves. So what ends up happening is both sides of the debate, instead of actually arguing with each other, will argue amongst themselves about how much they hate the opposition. So each side will build this totemic image of this loathsome party that is both infinitely maddening and infinitely defeatable. Notice whoever is presenting the role of the opposing party never does so in a fashion that will ever win the argument. They say, oh, well, they say this dumb thing, and of course, everyone who agrees with you can come in and tear them apart, thus feeling clever and engaged. So when both of these systems are doing this. What they end up doing is they drive voters towards each other. Yet again, you'd think they'd be clashing heads, but when in fact they have this symbiotic relationship. People who are maybe of a slightly conservative bent will look at this totem put up as the idiotic Republican, and they'll get offended because that totem represents some things they care about, maybe not all the things, but it represents them enough that they feel like they're being insulted. And they might be just conservative enough to see that the arguments being made by this conservative totem don't look like what they actually think or the ideas they actually put forward. So it makes the other side look worse. The other side looks just that much more intolerant and bullying. So they go further to the end. This happens on both sides. Anyone who might be somewhere in the middle gets bombarded by these totems about why something is evil, and it will eventually drive them from one side or the other. So you've got this system that ensures that we don't really talk to each other, we don't really reach any middle ground. Why would you preserve this? What could this possibly accomplish? One thing, it gets you to vote. Now, how does it get you to vote? Why would you vote for a system that literally gets almost nothing done? When about 50% of the population disagrees with you on something that you are told by all of your fellows is an important issue, then you're going to see the opposition everywhere. And as long as the opposition is everywhere, you're going to feel inclined to act. You have to defend yourself. You have to defend your interests. So you vote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all Party A and B